impossible with the God we're serving tonight. I knew on the inside He healed me completely, but outside my family could see no change. I was an ugly, twisted, deformed, crippled. I looked at Jesus quickly to see if He'd leave me half-healed. But when He begins something, He will finish it. He smiled and reached out His hand on one of the large knots in the center of my spine. I felt a hand placed there I'd never felt before, a hand charged with the divine healing virtue of Jesus. A tingling sensation started my feet and went through my entire body. I heard the bones crack and pop as the vertebrae went into place. In the presence of my family and those who were there, they saw the knots fade and disappear and leave my spine. My head snapped back into its right position. My paralyzed arms were raised high, and in 10 seconds I jumped from the chair and stood as straight as I'm standing tonight. I'd been healed by the mighty power of Jesus Christ. He had healed me completely and made me whole. You say, Betty, you mean instantly He healed you? I mean that. And when He instantly heals, that's called a miracle. That's not the only way He heals. There is a gradual healing. I pray for folks, and then sometimes 3, 4, 6 months later, a letter comes to the office telling me that from the time they were prayed for, they felt the power of God and went, and day by day and week after week, they got better and better till at last they were perfectly whole. That's a gradual healing. He heals both a gradual healing and an instant healing. It makes no difference just as long as He gets it done right. But He instantly made me whole. My baby brother jumped up and down, clapping his hands, saying, look at her. She's bigger than me. She's bigger than me. My sisters took hold of hands, hugged each other, and danced around the floor. I looked everywhere in the room because I was searching for my daddy, who just could not believe that Jesus heals today. I saw him by the living room door, his head in his hands. He was sobbing and crying. I walked over to him, pulled his hands down, and looked at him. Made him look at me, and I said, Daddy, do you believe now God can heal? He said, I believe anything after I seen this. It made a real believer out of my daddy. But the greatest part of the whole story is this. It is no secret what God can do. What He's done for me, He'll do for you. He's no respecter of persons. He does not love Betty Baxter more than He loves you. He loves you, and as soon as you come to Him in simple, childlike faith, you don't have to have a great big faith. People are trying to have great faith. Let me tell you something. You can get healed with a little faith in a great big God. Have faith in a great big God. All of our efforts could not do it. But if we have simple childlike faith to believe God, God's ready to meet your need. As I stood there completely healed, you asked me how I felt. I could keep you another hour and try to tell you. At the end of the second hour, you'd still never know unless you've been a hopeless crippled. It was something to look back at the chair and know it wouldn't ever hold me anymore. I could sit down if I wanted to, but I could get up and walk. But my entire body was strangely numb, and I felt that my body wondering why I feel numb all over. And then it came to me, this numb feeling must be what it feels like to have no pain in your body. And ever since He healed me, I've been enjoying that numb feeling. I praise God. When He healed me, He took the pain from my body. If you forget all the rest of the story tonight, always remember this part. It's the greatest. Don't ever forget it. As I stood there straight, healed by God's power, I looked back at the empty chair, and standing beside the chair still stood Jesus. His arms were outstretched toward me. He looked from the soles of my feet to the top of my head, and when I saw Jesus looking at me, I stood as straight as I could so He could see how good He made me. I believe He stayed to enjoy His handiwork, don't you? As He stood there, He looked deep into my eyes. And looking in my eyes, Jesus smiled and spoke these last words. Betty, I've given you the desire of your heart. I've healed you completely and made you whole. And I nodded my head because I knew He had. Still looking at me, He said, but I've got to leave you here for a little while. I'm going back to the Father and finish that mansion that's almost ready for you. I want you to go out and tell the world what I've done for you. Because when men and women hear this story, they'll be saved. And when they hear this story, they'll be healed and brought to God. And then smiling just before he backed in the cloud and went away, he smiled and said, and be thou faithful. And every day watch for a cloud. And the next time you see me coming in a cloud, I'm not going to leave you here, but I'm going to take you to be with me forevermore. He's coming back again. He said he was. Jesus Christ is coming back to earth again. Since the day he healed me, every day I've watched for that cloud. I haven't seen it yet, but someday I will. He never breaks a promise. And there are times, especially when I'm overseas and I'm homesick and tired, that I'll get on a jet and go way high and look at the white fleecy clouds and think if I look at one long enough, I'll see his face. I don't know about you, but I'm looking for Jesus to come back again. Heaven tonight is realer to me than it's ever been in all of my life. People across America and even overseas have written me letters and said, by hearing my story, they feel like they know my mama. I had my mother a long time. We were living in Singapore in September, and I was in Malaysia having a mean. My husband called from Singapore and told me I'd have to catch a plane out of Malaysia to come back. We had to come back to America. My daddy had passed away. I'd never lost anybody close to me before. And all that long journey back from Malaysia to Singapore, from Singapore to Los Angeles, from Los Angeles to Minneapolis. I got to Minneapolis, Minnesota, near where my parents live. And my baby brother I told you about met the plane. Daddy was gone. Mama seemed to be doing all right. But the doctor told Mama she couldn't attend Daddy's funeral, and she smiled and said, I'll be there. The doctor told my baby brother, tell her that I can't allow her to go. The emotional upset would be too much. My baby brother said, Mama, you can't go to Daddy's funeral, and she smiled and said, I'll be there. I arrived early on a Friday morning. I went to the funeral parlor where my daddy lay and looked at him. And then I grew restless. I wanted to go back and see Mama. I've been overseas for several months, and always my heart yearned to see my mother. I called her from Singapore, which to her was clear. It's like you, outer space. Mama thought that that was something unheard of, to think she could hear my voice clear from Singapore. So I was restless. I looked at Daddy. He looked so nice. He always dressed up, and my baby brother had him dressed in his nice dark suit and white shirt. And I looked at his face and stood there for 1 hour looking at his face and telling him that I loved him and thanked him for all he'd done for me since a child. But then my heart grew restless, and I went to my baby brother and said, we've done all we can for Daddy. He's gone, but Mama still lives, and I feel I got to go see her. I went to see Mama. She was been sitting in a chair, was sitting there when I got there. Everything was all right. She seemed to be doing so good, was sitting in the chair. After we arrived, and she was so anxious, they said she kept asking when was my husband going to get there. And she wanted to be sure that he was there. When she saw he was there, she says, tell them to put me back in my bed. I'm so very tired. She lay there and seemed to sleep, and then her head moved from the pillow, and her eyes got very wide. And I've been with many people when they went home to be with Jesus, and I saw that look and knew it. I screamed at my baby brother, Mama's going. And he said, no, Betty, she's resting. But I knew better. It wasn't 10 minutes. The Mama slipped away. Instead of having Daddy's funeral on Sunday, we had a double one on Monday. And that day I lost the greatest friend I've ever had or ever will have, my Mama. The reason I'm alive and able to tell this story tonight is because of a little mother. Nobody knows her name. She couldn't leave us very much, but she left me the greatest heritage of all, faith in God. I talked to my sister who was there to visit them. And just 2 days before Daddy passed away, she said they were sitting in their chairs side by side. And they're holding hands like they'd done for years. Daddy was 80, Mama was 78.